Yeah, so before we start, try to generate the correct motivation, according to the lines we discussed before, in order to achieve presumed rebirth for the benefit of all sentient beings to progress in state of path of enlightenment. I have to understand the 12 links, and for that purpose I'm here. Yeah, so think in those lines. And then in front of oneself is Sakyamuni Buddha, and surrounding yourself are the sentient beings of the 6 realms in human aspects, but they undergoing the individual sufferings. Yeah? So if you also look at a picture of the 12 links, you can see the different realms and different types of suffering. So imagine that all the sentient beings are surrounding yourself, although in human form, and then reflecting upon their suffering, think, I have to liberate them, and for that purpose I'm going to lead them in the prayer, and for that purpose I'm going to do this session. And then recite the prayers starting on page 5. Prayers on page 5. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfect, complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagata, know of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Bhagavan Buddha, glorious conqueror Sakyamuni, I prostrate and make offerings, go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfect, complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagata, know of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha, the Bhagavan, the glorious conqueror Sakyamuni, I prostrate and make offerings, go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfect, complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, know of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the Bhagavan, the glorious conqueror Sakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, go for refuge. When supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you played out the 7 strides, and that said, I am supreme in this world. To you, O wise, then I prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, flame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Savior, to you I prostrate. The supreme science, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Thus free like you, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the teacher having all understanding, the field of merits with qualities like a vast ocean, to you the one come to dustness I prostrate. The purity that frees from attachment, the virtue that frees from the lower realms, the one part, sublime pure reality, the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Do not commit any unwholesome actions, engage in perfect wholesome actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a cyclic view, a butter lamp flame, an illusion, a dewdrop, a water bubble, a dream, lightning, a cloud. See all congruous phenomena like this. Then we reach the Heart Sutra, page number 9. Thus I prostrate to the 3 noble, rare, sublime ones. Thus I heard at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling on the Mars Virtuous mountain in Rajgya, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration of the gatherers of phenomena called profound affection. Also at that time, the bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avilikasvara looked upon the very practice of the profound affection of wisdom, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty in nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said to the bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avilikasvara, how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice activities of the profound affection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avilikasvara said to the Venerable Shariputra, Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice activities of the profound affection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, and form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristics, unproduced, unstained, and without stain, and not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there's no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible form, no sound, no odor, taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, and up to and including no mind element and no mental conscious element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, and up to including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similar, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and part. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely and dwell in perfection of wisdom. The mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifest complete awakened, unsurprised, perfect, complete enlightenment, in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurprised mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that really pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata, Gata Gata, Paragat, Parasamgata, Bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan rose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avidvisvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that one should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you indicated, and even Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avidvisvara, and those surrounding there entirely, along with the worlds and gods, humans, asuras, and Gvanas were overjoyed and highly praised by spoken by the Bhagavan. Next page, down below. From the holy supreme realm of Gejara, who possesses the clairvoyance and magic emanations, look after practitioners without distraction, as you would like a child. To the host of the Dakinis of the three abodes I prostrate. Akasamara sasana samara samarayampi akasamara. Agasamara sasana samara samarayampi tayata gata gata parasamgata bodhisoha. By the teachings of the noble three sublime ones possessing the power of truth, may hindrance be averted, may they be disappointed, may they be pacified. May all enemies and negative forces opposed to the Dharma. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified, and may we be free from harmful conditions to the Dharma. And may all excellence be in conduit with the Dharma, and may there be auspicious and perfect happiness here, right now. Foundation of all good qualities. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect Guru. Correctly devoting to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is difficult to find again, and is greatly meaningful. Please bless me to generate that mind that uneasily day and night takes its essence. This life is impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like the shadow follows the body, the wreaths of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain, cannot be relied upon. Recognize these shortcomings, please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the Pratyamaksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so of all modern migratory beings. Please bless me to see this and train as supreme bodhicitta and bear the responsibility of freeing transmigratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta, but I do not practice the three types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I pacify distraction to wrong objects and correctly analyze the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At a time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping pure vows in Samaya. As I become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then, having realized the importance of the two stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up before sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the Gurus who show the noble paths and the spiritual friends who practice ever long lives, please bless me to pacify completely all out and inner hindrances. In all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. By completing the qualities of stages and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Then short mandala, page 22. Sajibegi Jojemeda Sangye Chudang Soni Sanamba Janjo Bada Dani Gyazuji Dagi Geshe Gibe Tsonangi Dola Penje Sangye Doba Jo Sangye Chudang Soni Sanamba Janjo Bada Dani Gyazuji Dagi Geshe Gibe Tsonangi Dola Penje Sangye Doba Jo Sangye Chudang Soni Sanamba Janju Bada Dani Gyasuji Dagi Shushe Gibe Tsonangi Dola Penshe Sangye Doba Yeah, so as we just read in the Foundation of All Good Qualities, seeking samsara pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain, cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate a strong wish for liberation. Yeah. So yesterday we talked about the doors of the senses, right? That by depending only on the doors of the senses, there's actually no satisfaction in happiness. Meaning, the more things you do that stimulates the senses, it will not enhance happiness, right? So that means the more you engage in the activities of the senses, or the object of the senses, so to say, everything in the contaminated world, the more you engage in it, is not that you become happier and happier. Yeah? So that's what it says in this verse. Yeah? So, and then recognizing this, these shortcomings, so not only the shortcomings of not finding satisfaction, but also the shortcomings of, the sickness of the suffering of birth, sickness, aging, death, never finding things you actually like to meet, or never meeting things you like to meet, and always meeting things you don't like to meet. So always being caught up with problems, so to say, on top of the suffering of birth, sickness, aging, and death. So there are the physical sufferings, right? Birth, sickness, aging, and death. And there are the mental sufferings, that we not capable of doing the things we like to do, and we never get satisfaction. So that's kind of the vision of suffering. And then Lama Tsongkhapa even adds another one to it and said, in short, having the contaminated aggregates. So as long as we have contaminated aggregates, meaning as long as we have contamination. So contaminations means karma and afflictions. As long as we have karma and afflictions, we will turn around the wheel of samsara. So we said...
Geshe, I'm sorry to interrupt. Geshe, I'm really sorry to interrupt. Talking about turning the wheel of karma, it's very, very crackly. So could we ask Sylvie to unplug the mic and you just use your voice? I'm really sorry to interrupt.
No problem. We use the voice.
I can, yes. It's echoey, but it's better.
Everybody else as well?
Can everybody say if it's better or
Okay.
Better. Okay, thank you, Geshe. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
I just repeat what I just said or not? I just start again. Anyway,
Go just on, Geshe. Just go on.
Okay, so I just quoted from the Foundation of All Good Qualities, that the shortcomings of samsara, the shortcomings of birth, sickness, aging, and death. Yeah, we are kind of physical sufferings. And then on top of that, we have the mental sufferings of, never meeting things we like to meet and meeting things we don't like to meet, and even finding things we're looking for. Yeah, and then Lama Tsongkhapa adds another line and says, in short, having the contaminated aggregates, meaning that as long as we have contamination, as long as we have karma and afflictions, basically we have to suffer. Yeah, so as long as we have karma and afflictions, then there's no way out of suffering. So that's why we have to study the 12 links, for example, to understand this whole complete cycle of how karma works and how affliction works. Right. So among the 12 links of interdependence, so to say, we have a kind of a few things that are in relation with karma, and a few that are in relation with afflictions, and a few are in relation with suffering. Yeah, so there's basically 3 types of afflictions and 2 types of karma, right? So that means that the first one, ignorance and grasping and graving. Yeah, so ignorance. Grasping. Sorry, the first one is graving. I always mix up the English terms. Yeah, so kasa. So ignorance, graving, and grasping, those 3 basically are afflictions, right? Yeah, because of ignorance, we generate more other afflictions. Yeah, ignorance is an affliction by itself. Yeah, so it depends on how you describe ignorance. Yesterday we talked about the view of the Vaibhasika a little bit, the view of Vaibhasika where it says ignorance is just not knowing, right? Not knowing the cause and effect, for example. Yeah? Well, Sautantrika says ignorance is a bit more than that. Yeah? Ignorance is that which is opposite to the mind that understands selflessness, right? So, meaning the apprehension of the self. Yeah, that's another ignorance. Yeah, where we talked about yesterday also the concept of an I or mind that exists all from itself, concrete, without dependence. Yeah. Then higher schools of Buddhist philosophy, they talked about ignorance in a similar way, but also more subtler aspects of ignorance, and seeing the self as an inherent or intrinsic identity. Yeah, so that can also be seen like that. And then we also discussed that having a view of that cause and effect doesn't exist, has the possibility to throw you in lower state of existence, because it's a non-virtue, right? But also within samsara we have virtuous cycles, right? As a human, for example. So that is not caused by this kind of extreme wrong view of thinking that law of cause and effect doesn't exist, because that's a non-virtue which cannot propel you in a higher rebirth. Yeah? So that means we have other good karma, so practice morality, for example, being the cause for precious human rebirth. Yeah? But the practice of morality is also motivated by ignorance, because we think I'm practicing morality, and then the I you conceive as an I that exists from its own side, right? So that means that also virtue or good things we do in life basically are motivated, so to say, with this ignorance, with this misunderstanding of a self. Yeah? So that's why ignorance... Oh, that was a kind of an echo. So that means that this ignorance has many aspects. Yeah? So then other schools, for those who study a bit more, they go a step further and they say the ignorance of not believing in law of cause and effect is a motivation at the time of the result. Oops, yeah, maybe turn off. So that means that the real cause motivation, the causal motivation, right? You have 2 types of intention. Intention at the time of the cause and at the time of the action, right? So whatever action we engage in, the motivation of the time of the cause is always colored or always influenced by this ignorance, right? Positive or negative. Yeah? So that's why this ignorance is very sneaky. Yeah, so that's to be understood. So that's why we're going to dedicate a few more sessions on ignorance and emptiness. Yeah? So the first link, going back to where we started with, by the power of karma and afflictions, we're born in this cycle of rebirths, right? By the power of karma and afflictions, we have these contaminated aggregates. Yeah, with get sick if you contact the virus, If you have the karma to get sick, sometimes you don't have the karma to get sick. Sometimes you have the karma to get sick and not die, or sometimes you have the karma to get sick and die. So there's many possibilities, yeah. So it depends on the inner cause of karma and external factors, right? External conditions. Yeah. So ignorance being the first affliction, yeah, in the line of 3. Then we have craving, yeah, and grasping. Yeah. So we decided before we explain a little bit more today, but we saw also yesterday that craving and grasping, basically causes the seed to ripen at the time of death. Yeah, so also we plant the seed, yeah, with the person of ignorance planting the seed, yeah, of karma in consciousness, and that ripens at the time of death, right? So then craving and grasping activates that seed. Yeah, so we're going to talk in detail about this because there are a few questions, and I try to deal with those questions while we explain it. Yeah, but just going back to this overview of Nagarjuna. Yeah, so Nagarjuna says in another text, not this one, in another text Nagarjuna says 1, 8, and 9 are afflictions, meaning ignorance, right? Craving and grasping. Yeah, there are 3 afflictions. Yeah. So by the power of karma and afflictions, we create contaminated aggregates, and by that suffering. So there's 3 afflictions within the 7 links. Of course, there's many more afflictions. If you study more, we have, the 6 root afflictions or 20 secondary afflictions. There's many classifications, right? But within these 12 links, we have 3 afflictions. Yeah? So there's ignorance, craving, and grasping. Yeah. So there are the afflictions. Then we say about karma and afflictions. Yeah? So what is karma? So karma is twofold, right? So there's number 2, which is we translate it as karmic formation, I think, or action. Yeah? So karmic formation, the second link, yeah, is karma. That is being defined as propelling karma or throwing karma. Yeah? That propels you, has the potential, I should say, that has the potential to propel you or throw you in another rebirth. With positive karma, positive rebirth. With negative karma, negative rebirth. Right. So that potential is planted in consciousness, right? As we discussed yesterday. Yeah. So that's the first karma within the 12 links, right? There's the second one, that is karmic formation or action. Yeah. Then the other one, where we discussed today, is sometimes translated as becoming or existence. Yeah. So becoming or existence, that happens after craving and grasping activates the seed. Yeah, so that is then actually starting to bring a potential for the sprout to come out. Yeah, so we have a seed of karma of the second link, right? It was planted in consciousness, the third link, right? Then by the power at the time of death, by the power of craving and grasping, then that seed gets activated, yeah, with in the soil with fertilization, heat and moisture, and that has the potential to grow into a sprout. Right? So that becomes the limb of becoming, right? So we're going to talk about today, but at least you get an idea what Nagarjuna says. There's 3 afflictions, right? Ignorance, craving, and grasping. Yeah? 2 types of karma. The second link of action, right? Which is throwing karma or propelling karma, who has the potential to throw you or propel you in another rebirth. And then at the time of death, yeah, then this link of becoming is basically we translate as establishing karma. The previous potential of the throwing karma gets activated by craving and grasping and gets established with the link of becoming. Yeah? So then you get the cycle round. Yeah? So that's for those who study a bit more, then if you classify it in different ways, it helps you to understand the 12 links a little bit better. Yeah? There's so many classifications in Buddhism, there's no end. You can have many classifications, but it makes things clear to categorize things in groups. So we have 3 afflictions among the 12 links, right? And then we have 2 types of karma we just discussed. Yeah? And then the remaining 7 falls into the category of suffering. Yeah? So that's why Nagarjuna says, I think in the Ratnavala, right? It says 1, 8, and 9 are afflictions, 2nd and 10th are karma, and because of that, the remaining 7 are suffering. So that's what we'd like to start with today. Yeah. So where are we in the text? In the text we discussed the first 4 verses, right? So we saw that by the power of ignorance, we create particular karma, right? By either positive or negative. Yeah. So we had an example of my friend in prison who killed another human being, right? Negative karma. Or the policeman in Maharashtra who organized a birthday cake. A worldly example, but why not? A birthday cake for this family, right? Some positive thing, which can, if all the factors are complete, can cause good karma to ripen, right? So positive karma. But both of these actions initially were motivated with this ignorance, right? It's not that you have to sit down and motivate yourself. It's spontaneous, right? Yeah. So this ignorance is there since the beginning of lifetime. Yeah. There's different types of ignorance. Ignorance also generated in this life. Yeah. That's kind of having misunderstandings. That's kind of an acquired form of ignorance. But the real root cause of samsara, so to say, is the ignorance that is there with us since the beginning of lifetime. Yeah, because that's much stronger and that needs more work to take care of. Yeah, so this ignorance causes us to generate an affliction, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride. Yeah, or it's there when we do something virtuous, generate compassion, love and kindness. Right. Then we do an act, either physically or verbally or mentally. Yeah, so we have the actions of body, speech, and mind, and those acts can be virtuous. Yeah, virtuous is defined as that which produces happiness, right? And non-virtue is defined as that which produces suffering, right? Yeah, so there's not a thing the Buddha made up. You know, some people think, oh, the Buddha just, he analyzed reality, right? Is like water is liquid, fire is hot and burning. It's not that that's made up, that's the law of reality, right? We can examine that reality, observe it, and define it. Yeah, so the Buddha, same thing. So non-virtue, so anger, for example, produces suffering, right? Virtue, being kind to another being. You can see, straight away if you act out of kindness, then automatically there's a kind of pleasant feeling with it, right? So that means that that's one result. There's a very kind of easy, understandable example, right? There's more complex aspects of karma, but generally speaking, virtue produces happiness, right? Non-virtue produces suffering. Yeah. Same way, destructive emotions produces disturbance, right? Constructive emotions produces kind of, very kind of stages of emotional intelligence that is capable of training the mind. Yeah. Yeah, and then there are the neutral or unspecified actions, right? So we talked about that. Yeah. So then this seed or this action stops at some time, right? We give the birthday cake or the person has been killed, the action stops. So that action stops, then leaves a kind of potential in the mind. As we saw yesterday, seeing things with your eye consciousness, looking other direction, right? Your eye consciousness perceiving the screen leaves an imprint in your mind to recall what you saw before, right? So that means it's not lost. Yeah, so that's with karma, same thing. So the seed is planted in the continuity of consciousness, right? So then, to make the cycle a little bit complete, then this seed is planted and waiting for it to get activated, right? So it gets activated with the 12 links at the time of death. Yeah? So at the time of death, there is the 2 links of craving and grasping, right? That activates. So that we're going to explain, because there's one question was regarding those points also. Then that is activated, and that produces potential to be reborn. Yeah, that's the link of becoming or existence. Yeah? And then we get a new birth. Yeah? So then the consciousness dives into a future lifetime. Yeah? So that consciousness that goes into a future lifetime in the womb of the future mother, right, generates a body and a mind, right? Yeah? So that's name and form, as we discussed yesterday. Name is referring to the 4 aspects of the mind, right, of the 5 aggregates: feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. Yeah, so we have 5 aggregates, right? The body aggregate, which is actually form in this context, and then 4 name aggregates, right? Feeling, discrimination, compositional factors and consciousness. Feeling, we know, right? Feeling can be also is also one of the links, right? Can be pleasure, displeasure, or neutral, right? Discrimination, the second mental factor. Discrimination is it's like this and not like that, or the color is this and that. Understanding things, discriminating things one from the other. Yeah, that's one mental factor. Then compositional factors is kind of a rest group. Compositional factors are all types of mental factors which are not feeling and not discrimination. Yeah, so that's the 5 aggregates. Yeah, so name and form basically talks about body and mind. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. So they come into being because the newborn starts to develop in the womb of the mother. Yeah, and then when it comes out of the womb, then also the senses are completely developed, right? Because in the womb then certain things are a bit difficult. To taste with your tongue is a bit difficult inside, yeah, because the food comes in another way. Yeah. And seeing things is also difficult because in the womb it's a bit dark. So, but then when you come out of the womb, then you see all the lights. Some people think birth is so nice. You see the baby and so cute, but mostly they cry when they come out. So that means there's some suffering of birth. Yeah. So the baby comes out, and then the doors of the senses, so to say, starts to act or starts to activate. Yeah. So we also yesterday we saw it's the doors of suffering. Why is it doors of suffering? Because if we don't understand how to deal with consciousness, so to say, if we're not emotional intelligent, then we might grasp at all the things of the senses and never get satisfaction. Right? But if we develop mental consciousness, mental consciousness is in power. Yeah? Mental consciousness can go to an extreme that it can cut sensory perception. Right? If you get calm abiding, for example, you can cut sense consciousness, right? So then only the blissful minds of mental consciousness is left. So that proves, and that blissful minds that comes with calm abiding is different from having a nice pizza or pasta or something like that. There's no comparison. So that means that with mental consciousness you can achieve much more types of happiness which are giving more satisfaction. Right? Yeah. So that's why it's not only a Buddhist thing to generate calm abiding, right? And a lot of non-Buddhists, especially in the Himalayas, in the Hindu tradition, there's a lot of incredible practitioners who dedicate their life to get these, different stages of samadhi, from the form and formless realms, because it's just blissful, And we all human beings want happiness, don't like suffering. So it's much nicer to stay in a blissful state than to have to deal with the things we deal with every day, So, but they can live in very remote places, and then when you get calm abiding, there's no need for food and drink anymore at a certain stage. So that's the possibility of developing of consciousness, right? Our physical aggregates, they're very limited with what we can do. That's the Olympic records. They get broken just with a few split seconds every now and then, but that's it. Well, the mind can be developed all the way up to enlightenment, right? So that's slightly different. The mind has a greater potential. So, but if you use it, if you don't use it in a proper way, then you're stuck with these sensory perception, and the whole commercial industry, they know that, so they try to sell you all the things that stimulates our senses, but actually they don't know it doesn't really give any satisfaction, right? So, even pop stars, they sung about these kind of aspects of life. I cannot get satisfaction, or I haven't found what I'm looking for, So how does it happen? As we saw yesterday also, because of the senses, and there's an object. Take, the pizza or the lasagna or whatever food you touch to, right? That's the object out there. So then we look at it, and then attachment can arise, or we taste it, attachment can arise, right? So there's many ways, objects or sound, if you, a nice song or something like that, or a movie, or whatever object what is out there, we look at, or we listen to, or we touch, or we smell. Some people are very attached to a particular smell, Then there's a consciousness, right? And there's a physical sense power, right? There's an eye or ear or nose or tongue, right? Or our tangible aspects of the body, right? That comes into contact with an object. There's a feeling with it, either pleasure or displeasure or neutral. And based on that, we act. Right? Because we want happiness, don't like suffering. So if there's a pleasure with an object, we want to have that object. You know? If there's displeasure or suffering with an object, we want to separate it from ourselves. So that's why if a person is in front of you you dislike, you want to do something to avoid the conversation or to avoid the person even. You know? So that means you like to separate it because it brings suffering. So there's this innate wish we all have, right? Wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. So based on that innate wish, if you don't use emotional intelligence, then you act in the wrong way and you end up in trouble. So that's what we discussed yesterday. Yeah, by contact, you come in contact with the senses, and then there are three conditions, right, or three aspects in verse 4, right? So that is the eye with the form of seeing form and shape, right, or shape and color. Sorry. So there's an eye consciousness, eye sense power, yeah, and then there's an object, in this case form, with this kind of shape and color, yeah, for the eye consciousness. And attention, I said the translation is maybe not the good one. You should put maybe, the Tibetan says tenje. Tenpa jeba means to recollect. Yeah, but the recollection actually here is not referring to the mental factor remembrance, but is referring to the directly preceding moment of consciousness. Yeah, we talked about every moment of consciousness is preceded by a previous moment of consciousness, right? So that means every moment of consciousness has a previous moment, that has a previous moment, that has a previous moment. Yeah, by the power of that also we established reincarnation. Yeah? So every consciousness needs a previous moment in order to come into being, right? Yeah. So also the time, if you look at the time now, it's 3:46, right? So 3:46 needs to have the 3:45 in order to label 3:46, right? Yeah. So in the same way, consciousness, every moment of consciousness has to have a preceding moment of consciousness in order to come into being. Yeah? So that's this attention, basically. Yeah. So then consciousness is produced. Yeah? If there's consciousness without an object, then the consciousness cannot perceive something, right? So there's a contact, there's an object, it's being perceived, and then a feeling comes. That's where we're going to now. Yeah. Verse number 5. Yeah? That which is assembled from the three, as we just discussed. Yeah, those three aspects of the sense power, the object, and the directly preceding moment of consciousness. Yeah? Then it says here again, I, form, and consciousness is contact. Yeah? So then, because of the contact with the object, then feeling arises, you see? So, then feeling arises. Yeah? So, feeling, we said, can be pleasure, displeasure, or suffering. Yeah? So, pleasure, suffering, or neutral. Yeah? So, three types of feeling. And based on having that feeling, we act. Right? It's true, isn't it? I mean, if there's some nice feeling, we try to be with it. Same with persons, no? People who are quite nice, you like to be with, right? People who are very annoying, you like to avoid. You know, that's the nature of our being, because we want happiness and we like suffering, right? So same with food. Food we like, we incline to eat more than food we dislike, right? So food we dislike, we like to avoid. So the same thing. Yeah? So based on that feeling, yeah, if there's just feeling, pleasure or displeasure, what we discussed yesterday, if you keep neutral, if you keep your mind neutral, and a few techniques in Buddhism as well, then you don't engage in getting either attached or generating aversion. Yeah? So attached to those things you like, aversion to those things you don't like. Yeah? So that's a mind training, that's possible. If you contemplate the drawbacks of attachment, right? Strong attachment, right? Or the drawbacks of strong desires to get something, to want something, to need something. If you think about, there's no satisfaction anyway, so why should I strive for these kind of things and be content, right? So if you think in that way, you can cut desire or very strong forms that disturbs the mind, right? So same with anger. No? If you contemplate patience again and again, seeing the faults of anger and contemplating benefits of practicing patience or practicing love and kindness, for example. Yeah? If you do it in that way, your mind starts to turn over. Right? That's what we do in analytical meditation. If you be convinced about something to acquire with different reasons, you like to go in that direction, right? So that means that if you're really convinced about the drawbacks of anger and the benefits of practicing patience, then the mind starts to shift, right? Yeah. So in that way we can train. That's possible. Everybody can change, you know. So as many examples in daily life, you can see people very uptight and want to do something. If you don't want to do anything about it, then you're stuck in the same kind of pattern, right? But if you really want to change, you can do that. So there's many examples. A few of my own friends who started with these kind of things, and then they were so uptight in the beginning in traffic, when they're in a traffic jam and getting late and shouting at the person in front. But it was winter, and all the windows closed, cold outside, so the heater is on, but he's still shouting at the person in front. And the person in front also, windows closed, listen to some music, and doesn't hear the person behind him, right? So the person getting angry at the person in front only has himself, right? So that means that in those cases, anger is disturbing, because you don't like the traffic jam, and then you get irritated. But the irritation is more harmful than just, having to stay in the traffic jam for 15, 20 minutes, So after 50, 20 minutes, it's gone, But if you get irritated, the irritation stays for the rest of the day, and then for hours you're disturbed, instead of just 10, 20 minutes, right? Yeah. So that's a mental training you can use to prevent, when you meet an object and there's a feeling, to get either too strong desire to the objects we like, or aversion to the objects we don't like. Yeah? So that's a kind of possibility. But if you realize emptiness and you eliminate ignorance, then, though there's feeling, there's no craving and grasping anymore, you see? So that's also a reason, from the first link we see, if you start understanding emptiness, then the first link doesn't come into being, right? So you're safe. Yeah? Also in this link, if you realize emptiness, then there's just feeling, but there's no craving and grasping. Yeah? Yeah. So verse number 6, it says, conditioned by feeling, by the power of feeling, pleasure, displeasure, yeah, neutral, arises craving. Yeah? Craving arises because of feeling. Yeah? When it arises, there's grasping. So the difference between craving and grasping is the intensity. Yeah? So grasping is stronger than actually craving. Yeah? So craving and grasping in that regard it has many aspects. Yeah? Normally here it says which comprises 4. Yeah? So generally speaking, in many texts it talks about 4 aspects. Yeah? So also in the Lamrim Chemo and most of the Lamrims you can see those 4 aspects. Yeah? So then if you study those aspects well, you see it's not only attachment, because one of the questions that came up is kind of, if you have positive karma, you're attached to things, then that causes suffering, right? But if you do negative karma, you're not attached to negative things, that was one question in that regard. So that means that to craving and grasping is a little bit more to say than just attachment, right? It's a desire, wanting to engage in a particular way, right? So same with negative acts, right? The more you're inclined to like killing, then that's also a kind of desire or attachment, right? So that can also ripen at the time of death. Yeah? So by having wrong views of reality, misunderstandings, not understanding the law of cause and effect, some people, they like to kill, right? So that's also kind of desire or attachment to that activity, Yeah, so that's, craving and grasping, and those 4 aspects, basically, generally speaking, they are being translated as desire, as we just discussed, yeah? Wanting to engage in something, yeah? Or same when we talked about the prison example, yeah? People who come out of the Holborn prison from Norway, there's only 20% that falls back to old habits, because their mind changed a little bit in the period being in prison, right? So although they meet similar conditions as they had before, they know how to deal with it in a different way. So they don't fall back to these old habits. If you don't have the training and you go back to your old, environment, then because of the habituation, again there's this desire to steal or to kill or to do things. You see? Yeah. So that's the first one, desire. Yeah? Then the second one is tawa, means view. Yeah? So here there's 2. View. That means what kind of view? misunderstandings of reality. Yeah? So misunderstandings of different aspects of law of cause and effect, for example. Yeah? That's one aspect, the view, second. Then the third one, dakta, is kind of, jitta is a kind of, that's actually the third one, is referring to the view of the transitory collection. We're going to talk about that more when we deal with emptiness. Yeah? So with a view of the transitory collection, or that means that you see the aggregates of body and mind, you see them existing from their own side, or you see a self that exists, on top of the aggregates, right? So you think that when we get angry, or as I explained before, or when attachment, strong desire arises, it's a very strong, appearance of a self that looks to appear from its own side without dependence. Yeah. So that's, in short, what we call the view of the transitory collection. So, but technically speaking, we say mind, that focuses upon or apprehends the aggregates, and based on apprehending the aggregates, conceives or thinks that there is a self existing inherently. Yeah? So that's the view of the transitory collection. Yeah, that's number 3. Number 4 is then the tsultum dushuk, or that means kind of misconduct, misbehavior, not moral kind of behavior, and being attached, having kind of desire for those kind of aspects. Yeah? So you see, there's a little bit more than just craving and grasping. Yeah? So these 4 points, they mainly categorized within the category of grasping. Yeah? Because if you have stronger desire, it will enhance this craving, right? If you have a stronger view of, kind of concrete aspect of reality, then also it increases. Same thing. The more we inclined to think things exist from their own side, afflictions will be much stronger. The more people have a more strong concept of I and me, more self-centric, the more afflictions will come up. There's a Buddhist principle, but it's also been examined in different types of research, in psychology, behavior science, different aspects. So Daniel Brown, researcher from the Harvard Medical School, did research regarding these points. If a strong self-concern, is that really harmful or not? So this person did very interesting research with, I mentioned quite often this example, but it's very striking, So you calculate in a 10 minutes conversation, you just calculate how many times the person in conversation refers to I, me, myself. So if you study linguistics, you know that what we talk about reflects our emotions, right? How people use words reflects their emotional life or their habituation. That's quite evident. We can see some people talk in different ways, and then we see the character and say, oh yeah. So that means that if you study linguistics, you know how people express things. Has a relation with the mental states. Same with Paul Ekman, I mentioned the other day, with facial expressions, same thing. People have different expressions, and then we can more or less, we don't have to have clairvoyance, but we can more or less see what is the same for me now. I'm looking at the screen, I see myself. It's like looking in a mirror. So then I don't really know if people are really paying attention, or, it's kind of, it's just helpful. If you see faces, then you see, oh, people are paying attention, or I have to crack a joke, or tell a story, So that's facial expressions. It gives us a little bit of idea what's going on inside the mind, right? So the same with talking. If I look at the questions, then I know where people are, right? So same thing. So in this research, they calculate how many times I and me has been beside 10, 15 minutes conversation. Very easy research. You get the data of the amount of words, then you look at the health records, and you can draw conclusions, right? So then the conclusions were people were more self-concerned, so to say. Yeah, they had a higher score in health issues with blood pressure, heart diseases, right? And mental issues with depression, low self-esteem. Very interesting. So it's not, that's what I said, it's not made up by the Buddha. The Buddha examined this aspect of reality. And if in science we expect we analyze these aspects, then we can come to the same conclusions, right? So it's not made up by the Buddha and it's called a religion and everybody has to believe it because the Buddha said, don't believe what I say, examine, you know. So that's very interesting. So that's why His Holiness Dalai Lama is so open to scientists. There were a lot of other religious leaders who told His Holiness, be careful. If you engage with science, it can destroy religion. But His Holiness is full of trust and said, no, we based on reasoning, you know. It's very interesting. Because if you analyze well, same with quantum mechanics, same with destructive emotions, be very open, you know, to discuss, or with neuroscientists to discuss issues in science and philosophy, right? Or psychology. Yeah, so it's very interesting. So that means that it proves from different angles that people were more self-concerned based on this concrete concept of I and mine. Another reason is true, you know, if we get our problems we put as concrete, unchangeable, you know, if you think in that way, it becomes difficult, right? If you see your problems and issues in life, that with the virus, same thing. The virus happens. I had the same feeling when I was in Nepal, and a bit, you know, I came back to Kathmandu, I didn't watch the news for two or 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden things happen, so you're a little bit freaking out, what's going on, because you didn't expect this to happen, right? So that means that we grasp so much to permanence, but if you're in full control over the understanding of law of cause and effect, then of course you think, yeah, of course, it's gonna happen, you know? This is not, those things happen in life, right? So if you have that acceptance, same with my example of my mother when my father passed away, if you have that acceptance of understanding reality, then you save so much mental suffering because you understand what's happening. Yeah. So I hope everything is, because I'm still looking at the screen and then, you know, looking in the mirror, so then you can look if I'm getting more grey or not. You know, when we have a center in Bangalore, and then once many years ago we invited Geshe Namdak Lobsang Tsering, who was in his 80s. You know, I mentioned the other day when we went to his classes, then he never had a book on the table. You know, he was like mid-80s, but his mind was like a razor blade. You know, he would remember the quotations and sometimes the page numbers. You know, so he was sitting there, and you know, he would just challenge us, you know, debating, and then ask us how things stuck together. And then we explained, and they said, "Are you sure?" And then we said, "Yes." And then we start firing us with logic to see if we got it right or wrong. You know, very amazing master. You know, he was kind of very impressive teacher. No text on the table, but just teaching from memory, and that very complicated aspects of the mind only, for example, very complex aspects. So then when we invite him to Bangalore, because he's kind of a real traditional Vinaya person who has a very simple room. When we went to Piti, sometimes if you're early, you can sit in his living room, it's very small. If you're a bit later, you sit in the little hall. A bit later than that, you sit in the kitchen. You know, so that's how we now everybody sits home in the sofa or on the Zoom. You know, very comfortable. So in those days, we're just sitting on the concrete with a piece of foam. You know, attending those teachings. You know, so anyway, so then his room was very simple. So he came to Bangalore, and there's a mirror in the guest house, right? So he looked in the mirror and he said, "Oh, I'm getting old," and I was like 83 or something, 84 at that time. So yeah, I'm the same feeling, looking at the screen, not seeing the people. Anyway, so to go back to where we are, that graving and grasping is not just an attachment, right? It's a desire, and sometimes it's a kind of a view, as I just said, or in relation with this grasping at concrete existence, right? So it's a bit more than just desire. So that can happen, you grasp or grave for positive things or negative things, or these kind of inclinations, basically, right? Yeah. So that's these four refer to desire. Yeah, the last line of this verse 6. Yeah, refers to desire, a wrong view other than the view of the transitory collection. Number 2, right? The bad views, basically. Then 3 is the view of the transitory collection, and then the 4th one is misbehavior or misconduct. Yeah, so having a supreme attitude towards those aspects. Yeah, so that's graving and grasping. Yeah, so it's what we just 2 other afflictions next to ignorance. Right, we started to talk with ignorance is one affliction. craving and grasping are 2 other afflictions. Yeah? So we have 3 afflictions among the 12 links. Yeah? And then number 7, it says when there is grasping, the existence is being translated. Yeah? So existence, second line, verse number 7, you can put a 10 if you want. Yeah? So that's number 10 in the sequence. Sometimes it's been translated as becoming. Yeah? So here's existence. In Tibetan is sipa. Sipa is actually kind of existence in the sense of, the potential to become is ready. So yeah, that happens. That's existence. So that's what we just talked about in the beginning, establishing karma, right? There's 2 types of karma, remember? The second link of karmic action, of karmic formation, is throwing karma, right? This link of existence or becoming is establishing karma, as we just talked about. Yeah? So that actually establishes the rebirth. Yeah? Yeah, you see that? That's the existence of becoming. Yeah. Of the one who craves comes into being. Yeah? So if there's no, here it also says already, the last 2 lines of verse 7, if there's no grasping, then being freed, he would not take samsaric rebirth. He or she, right, is referring to a person who has eliminated ignorance. Yeah? If you have ignorance, yeah. So if you have direct perception of emptiness, we talk about here, if you have direct perception of emptiness, basically, you don't create new negative karma or positive karma within samsara, right? So if you have direct perception of emptiness, like Arya beings, as we technically say, or noble beings, they have direct perception of emptiness, they don't create links of the 12 links anymore. So new throwing karma and establishing karma does not come into being. You see that? Yeah? But there's still previous karma left. Yeah? So that can be purified, right? In the process of realizing emptiness again and again and staying in that aspect of realizing emptiness in that meditation session. Yeah? So that's what it says here, the last 2 lines, right? If there's no grasping, then then you be freed. Yeah? So that means grasping in the sense of 2 aspects, from the root cutting it by realizing emptiness, cutting ignorance, right? Or where we just from day-to-day life, it can also be helpful to not, where we just talked about when the consciousness or the sense perceptions, when they meet an object, right? When they meet an object and there's a feeling, if you don't have craving and grasping, you don't create kind of suffering future, right? You see that? Yeah. So that's also how you can think about it. Yeah? Then, verse number 8, it says, this bird is comprised of 5 aggregates, as we just talked about, right? The body and the mind. Yeah? So, from existence, we just discussed, right, in verse number 7, existence. From existence arises birth, number 11. Yeah? So, number 11 is birth. Yeah? And if you have birth, then you have old age and death. So that means that as soon as you're born, you're going to die, right? So many people, they don't like to know they're dying, even if they're almost dying or in the process of dying, but we know, right? It's a guarantee. Yeah. So as soon as you're born, you're going to die one day, right? And then in between birth and death, there's the things we just discussed, right? Getting sick, or mental or physical sufferings. So the more you contemplate those things, the more you generate a wish not to have this again. And that's why we meditate on suffering. That's why we meditate on the 12 links. In all the Lamrim subjects, we study or we engage in or we try to put into practice, it's always very important to know, why do I do this? Why do I meditate on this? Why do I study this? Then you have to know, how do I meditate on it, right? And then, after having meditated, we have to check if you did it correctly or not. It's a very scientific approach, So that means, why do we meditate on the 12 links? In order to understand the problems, in order to understand the suffering. And by understanding that aspect, you can prevent yourself from falling into lower states of existence. By not engaging in negative deeds, right? purify negative deeds of the past, and engage in virtue or morality. Yeah? So then you get a higher rebirth. So even higher rebirth as a human being is still not perfect. We have amazing conditions, but still not perfect, because we still have the suffering of birth, sickness, aging, death, and mental sufferings, right? So that means that if you generate a wish to be free of all types of suffering, you generate a wish for liberation, right? So, you understand, if there's no ignorance, then this cycle stops. So, I have to realize emptiness. So then you progress on this path by your motivation of wanting to be free of samsara. You start engaging in understanding emptiness, realizing emptiness, and then slowly you eliminate these 12 links, right? Yeah. And then also, if you contemplate the suffering of sentient beings again and again and again, every single moment, yes, every single moment beings create causes for suffering. So depending on these 12 links, by the nature of the 12 links, by understanding that aspect, you generate compassion. And by understanding compassion, you generate a wish to free all sentient beings from their suffering and wanting to accomplish a state in which you are capable to eliminate beings from their suffering, which we call enlightenment, right? So that means that these 12 links, why do we study them? In order to generate the 3 scopes of the Lamrim, right? Yeah. So that's why we study them. Then how do we meditate on them? By reading the commentaries, right? So this is a very brief explanation we do over these days. There's some recordings, it's also quite brief, right? Or a video that's even more abbreviated version of the 12 links. But you have to study, like Lamrim Chemo, right? Lama Tsongkhapa's great exposition of the stages of the path to enlightenment. There's only a few pages, very clear setup. Or Pabongka Rinpoche's Lamrim, Liberation Palm of Your Hand, or other Lamrims in the Nyingma tradition, like, you can study the Words of My Perfect Teacher, for example, or in the Kagyu tradition, you can study Kombopa's Lamrim, so, and in the Sakya, separating from the 4 attachments, you can have the different texts which suits you to understand these levels of samsara, right? Yeah. So that's how we meditate on it, by first understanding it correctly, and then in steps we meditate. We can do verse by verse, or cycle by cycle, or combine cycles, as we just did. Okay, there was 3 afflictions, right? How does they work? And there's 2 types of karma. How does that work? So slowly, in one presentation you won't get it. In one reading you won't get it. So you have to read, discuss, receive some more teachings. Then slowly, it starts to make sense. What I said before, these 12 links in the monastery we study for 2 to 3 months. So here we do it for, a few hours. So you cannot expect too much, right? So to see that in verse number 9, for example, verse number 8 we didn't finish. So birth arises, and because of birth there's old age and death and misery. So there's mental and physical suffering. Mourning is you talk about those things, and suffer is actually experiencing it. Grief and confusion, so that also refers to mental and physical types of suffering. All these arise entirely because of birth. Contaminated birth. We said everything that is contaminated is a cause for suffering. It's not that also a human body is so bad. It's not, because we can use it. If you use it properly, you can use it to achieve liberation and enlightenment, right? So, but the contaminated aspect of it, that has to be abandoned, so that people think, this body is full of suffering, I have to throw it off the bridge or something. that doesn't really solve the problem, So suicide never solved the problem in that regard, because in future lifetimes, we keep going. So we have to deal with issues, right? So that means that the contaminated aspect, that's the problem. So that contaminated aspects is karma and afflictions. Negative karma we can purify, as we said yesterday. It's so important to do purification practices to get the right conditions, right? Also Lama Zopa Rinpoche in the organization. Yesterday I mentioned Lama Dakpo Rinpoche and different other lineage lamas, and in the monastic institutions, nunneries, monasteries. There's a very strong tradition, of doing preliminary practices, purify negative deeds, accumulate merit. That's preparing the soil. No? If the field is prepared well, it's just planting the seeds and things grow easily, But if the field is not really well prepared, you can plant as much as you like, put a lot of effort, but it doesn't really go, So that's why there's a lot of emphasis also within these different programs in this particular organization, but it's true in all other organizations, other traditions, So some people say, Nyingma, Kagyu, and Sakya, they do a lot of preliminary practice. The Gelug doesn't, but in the Gelug also, if you see Lama Tsongkhapa's biography, for example, the amount of mandalas and prostrations is mind-boggling, Why? Because Lama Tsongkhapa was such an incredible scholar. He probably had memorized in his 20s when he composed the Golden Rosary, commentaries on the Abhishmalankara, He must have memorized like 20-something commentaries, the way he wrote it down, Such a scholar. Then he asked Manjushri, thanks to Lama Umapa, his home Manjushri, he said, okay, which view of emptiness do I have, Prasangika or Svatantrika? Two highest views of Buddhist philosophy. Then Manjushri said, neither. So then Lama Tsongkhapa says, so what do I do? Then Manjushri said, you go in solitary retreat. Take 8 disciples and go and do preliminary practices, purifying activities. And Lama Tsongkhapa did very basic, though he studied Tantra, he studied so many things, but he started with the basics. Very interesting. Like purifying, accumulation of merit, then reading Lamrim, related before he, other texts of Lamrim he composed, but at that time he was depending on another great Lamrim, so he was, moving in that direction, and later on he engaged in other practices of Vajrayana, right? So in order to realize emptiness initially, he did a lot of purification and accumulation of merit. Yeah? So that's a message. So then, mourning and suffering. Where are we? So grief and confusion, all these arise because if you have this accumulation of merit and purification, then to understand the Dharma becomes easier. To get the realization becomes easier, because we have. Since beginner's lifetime, we have got these rebirths, and we have habituated to all these afflictions, a very long period of time, that prevents us from seeing reality, So that's why in the Vaibhasika, we say ignorance, they say it's not knowing, just merely not knowing. In one way, it's very true, because we don't really understand many aspects of samsara or emptiness, right? Because we are obscured by these layers of thickness of grasping at concrete existence, and all the afflictions that come with it. So that has to be taken away in order to see reality. So for that purpose it's important to do these practices. But anyway, so number 9, verse number 9 says, grief and confusion, all these arise entirely because of birth. So contaminated birth, right? In this way, this very mass of suffering comes into being. So until verse 9 talks about how we are cycling in samsara again and again and again. So then another thing to be addressed is then in how many lifetimes do these cycles get complete? We just completed 12 links, right? So these 12 links, can be completed in 2 lifetimes or more lifetimes. So how does it work? For example, in one lifetime, there's the first 3. Right? So there's ignorance, you do something out of ignorance, you do an act, karmic act, that ceases to exist, that leaves an imprint in your consciousness, right? So that's done. So then, next lifetime, you can be reborn, or next life, there can be many lifetimes, but if you have it in 2 lifetimes, then that's done in your life, right? You commit an act, it leaves an imprint, planted in consciousness. The seed is planted, but there's no conditions of fertilization yet. So then at the time of that, then craving and grasping are the aspects of fertilizing these seeds. And then becomes the existence or becoming, number 10. The aspect of establishing karma, right? So that's one lifetime. You see that? One lifetime. So in one lifetime, we have the first 3 links, then number 8, 9, and 10. Craving, grasping, and becoming. You see that? So there's 6 in one lifetime. So then you die. And then you die, you go, because one question was on the bardo, you go into the bardo. And then there's rebirth, right? So if you go into the bardo, it's falling asleep. When we go to bed in the evening, same thing. The things that keeps us going throughout the day, the same way we were thinking when we go to sleep, and things will come up in the dream, right? So the dream state is very similar to the bardo. The bardo is a little bit more intense because, the conscious leaves this particular body when you die and goes into this in-between state, and the subtle body you have can, go with the speed of, light, so to say, or speed of thought, basically. And, very sensitive and, it's all kind of things. So it's similar to the dream state. Yeah? Then you wake up from the dream, and it's similar to being reborn, right? Yeah, so that's how it works. Yeah, so then your consciousness leaves the body at the time of death, yeah, and then when it leaves your body, and then you go into the bardo. Then when the bardo being dies, then we go to the fourth link, right? Name and form. Yeah, consciousness dives in the future mother, right? So then the fourth link, name and form, comes. After name and form, we have 5, 6, and the 6 senses, right? Or the 6 sources. Yeah, then contact, then feeling. Yeah, based on that feeling, we generate again craving or grasping. You see that? Yeah. So, and then there's old age and death. You see that? Yeah. So, in 2 lifetimes, yeah, we have the first 3 in one, and then number 8, 9, and 10 in 1 lifetime. Yeah. So there's ignorance, karma, and consciousness, right? 1 lifetime. Yeah? And then at time of death, we have craving, grasping, and becoming, right? Those 3. So that's 1 lifetime. Then you die, reborn. When you're reborn, there's name and form, right? Name and form and the other aspects of the senses, contact, feeling, old age, and death. Yeah, so you see, that means that those links, right? That means that birth, right? 11 and 12, and then number 4, 5, and 6, they in the future lifetime. Yeah, you see, there's 2 lifetimes. Yeah, that's possible. It's also possible to have it over more lifetimes. Yeah, you have ignorance, karma, planted in consciousness, but it doesn't ripe at the time of death in this life. But it ripens at the time of death of any other lifetimes in the future. Yeah, maybe 10 lifetimes later. Yeah, so then it comes to ripening, you're born again. Yeah, so that means then the whole 12 links of one particular karma, yeah, actually is completed in 3 lifetimes. Right? The first 3 links in 1 lifetime, right? Ignorance, kasa, karma, and consciousness, 1 lifetime. Yeah, then a few lifetimes down the line, at the time of death, there's craving and grasping and existence. Yeah, 2nd lifetime. Then the 3rd lifetime, there's birth, old age, and death, and the other remaining links of name and form, 6 senses, contact, and feeling. You see that? So it has to complete all the 12 links. Yeah, it has to. You need at least 2 lifetimes, 2 or more lifetimes. Yeah, that's one thing to be said also. Then, yeah, maybe to continue. So up till and including verse 9 is basically how we are propelled in cyclic existence. Yeah? The last 3 verses, 10, 11, and 12, actually talks about how to stop this cycle. Yeah? So that leads up to the coming days of understanding emptiness. Yeah? Because without understanding emptiness, you cannot eliminate ignorance. Right? So 10, 11, and 12 talks about how to stop samsara. Yeah? So the root of cyclic existence is compositional factor. Yeah? So normally we say the root of cyclic existence is ignorance. The view of the transitory collection. Yeah, but here the meaning of root of cyclic existence is actually the actual main cause, for karma to take rebirth. That's what it mentioned here, because that's this karma, right? That actually is a real cause for direct suffering, right? So before that, we have the root cause of ignorance. Yeah? Therefore, the wise do not engage in compositional factor. Yeah? So the wise doesn't create this contaminated karma. Yeah? The unwise are the agents. Yeah? The unwise, those who don't have understanding of reality, like us, right? We create the same karma and the same problems again. Yeah? And the wise, they see reality, meaning the wise, they understand ignorance and they understand the reality in the sense of seeing that things don't exist from their own side as we think they do. Yeah, so that we're going to talk about more. with the cessation of ignorance, so if you eliminate ignorance, right, compositional factor will not arise. If you take away the first link, the second link will not arise, right? Yeah, so if you realize emptiness, in particular direct perception of emptiness, that's what it says, Arya beings, they don't create newly these links anymore, because the link of ignorance, they have still ignorance, but not the ignorance within these 12 links, so they never create the 12 links anymore. Yeah? The cessation of ignorance occurs through insight and meditation. Yeah? So that refers to direct perception of emptiness. Yeah? Through the cessation of these, those will not be manifest, the entire mass of suffering. Indeed, thereby completely ceases. So that means that, yeah, you need to realize emptiness, basically to stop this cycle of rebirths, right? So if you don't have ignorance, you don't create contaminated karma. If you don't create contaminated karma, you don't create contaminated rebirths, right? So that's bas, they say. Finito. Yeah, that's the end, you know, the end. There's a song of the Doors also, this is the end, I think. Remember? My only friend. But that was a different end than the end we're talking about here. So that means that if you understand emptiness, even as Arya Deva said, if you just have a doubt about emptiness, in the sense of maybe the self exists in the way it appears, or maybe not. Probably not. That doubt shakes samsara, meaning it's shaking up these kind of 12 links, you know. So that's emptiness is not easy to be understood, but extremely important, you know, for you know, to stop these kind of 12 links, you know. So that's a very short, extremely short presentation of the 12 links, right? So I thought I'd just read Tibetan, because my presentation is just blah 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 without any any benefit. But I received these teachings many times from His Holiness, two times I think, yeah, 2 times. These particular chapters, and also once His Holiness gave the whole text in Gomang monastery opening. So just because if you read from Tibetan, then basically it carries a kind of blessing from the author, which is Arya Nagarjuna, all the way up, you know, to the present, you know, an unbroken lineage. So there's always, His Holiness always gives, you know, just these things to put imprints in the mind. Yeah, we talked about the benefit of studying Tibetan or Sanskrit. One aspect is imprints, you know. So that's, I thought I'd just read maybe from Tibetan as maybe auspiciousness. Yeah. Marik jiba yansi ji duje namba sumbo da ngoba duje kanyambao le de da gi do watu duje genche namba je do namze juga gyu namba je ba shu gyurna mingdan sukni chaba gyu mingdan sukni chagyuna geje tukni jungwa gyu geje tukla tenani Rekba yanda jungwa gyu migdan sudan tenje la tena gewa kona te dedar migdan sudan namba sheba gewa gyu migdan sudan namba she sumbo duba kanyemba deni rekba rekdele zorba kunde jungwa gyu zoba gengi seba de zorba dunde seba gyu ne nevalen namba shibo ne len gyu delen yu na len Siba kunde jungwa gyu kyalde newa lemena dowa gyurwa desi mi gyur siba deyang pongponga siba lani gewa jung kyashi lani le nane da mene menga dunje mena dunje dune da yimi dedan dugana deda gela rabde jung dedar juna pongponi ba shi pongpo de la jungwa gyur gowa tsawa duje de deje geba namje duje mi je deje mi ge jeba geba de ni to gyung gyur miri kakpa gyunani duje namgyun jung mi gyur mare kakpa gyurani sheba de ni gomba so dedang deda gyagyo ba dedan de ni ngomi gyu duna pongpo ba shi go de ni de tar yanda ga siba yana chuni gi dakshe wa de rabde jewa nishu tubaos. So that's the 26th chapter we just discussed. so that's a very brief presentation, and maybe we try to do short meditation on it, and then we do some questions, answers after that. So another thing I was planning to say for meditation, we're going to do another twofold meditations, right? We're going to do concentration meditation and analytical meditation. So with the concentration meditation, we use to count the breath, right? So to count the breath 1 to 10, remember? So when we are counting the breath, it's also very important to have two mental factors, alertness and mindfulness. So alertness helps us not to not really know what we are doing anymore. Sometimes we try to meditate and then the mind is somewhere else on the planet for a few minutes, and then we don't really realize what we're actually supposed to be doing. So alertness helps us to recognize that. And mindfulness is another mental factor which remembers what we're actually supposed to be doing. So that means that it brings us back. As soon as we get distracted, we bring it back and know what we are doing is the counting of the breath. So alertness and mindfulness, two mental factors, very important. While you're doing the counting of the breath, so it's like a policeman on the side, the main mind is counting, right? And just from the corner, you be aware that the mind doesn't get distracted. So that's very important. We can do the same thing. We can walk on the street with a map on our phone and look at the street and the map at the same time, right? So, in a similar way, main aspect of the mind is concentrating on the object of concentration, which is the breathing, right? So, and then from the corner of the mind, you be aware the mind's either get distracted or not. So these two mental factors, alertness and mindfulness, where we talked about yesterday with an OCD issue, right? How to train the mind, how to generate more emotional intelligence, they use exactly the same mental factors. Because if you train well in these concentration meditations, you'll be much more in control. Which thought to follow and which not to follow. So you'll be much more in control of your mind. There's a training, right? So because you train your mind to think about the thing you like to think about, and that is counting of the breath. So then in the future, in daily life, when negative thoughts comes up, because of those mental factors being established, then you see, this negative thought is causing a problem. Don't follow it. You see? And then you can burn mindfulness, you go back to what your intention was for the day. You see? So then these training in these two mental factors can bring great benefit. So that's why we do that with the counting of the breath, meditation, right? The concentration meditation. And then with the analytical meditation, maybe we can try to see how, according to what we did more or less yesterday, how basically different states of mind activate holocausta, right? So that's why at the time of death, extremely important that the person has a positive state of mind. So if you're close to another person who is dying, it's extremely important to generate positive states of mind. That doesn't, if the person is not a Buddhist, then you don't try to enhance Buddhist views, right? And you try to help the person to think in a way the person feels comfortable with and generates positive states of mind. Because we just saw that the mind at the time of death is crucial. So at the time of death, whatever we think can activate particular karma. So it's the same when we fall asleep, If you very stressful and you fall asleep, or you fall asleep when you're really agitated with a person, right? Then you will see that not only sleeping is difficult, but also when you wake up, you still didn't really feel rested. You still did a bit kind of agitated, right? So that's this continuity of this consciousness, right? That carries on by the power of habituation and triggering it, So that means in the same way, if you have a kind of habituation built up in your mind, it's easier to trigger that. So that's, if you have a positive habituation built up, if you always think about practicing patience and loving kindness, then it's easier to develop that more and more and to trigger it at the time of death. And that's why there's all kind of techniques to shoot the consciousness. If the Lama who is doing it has this particular kind of capacity in a pure land or something like that, or in good rebirth, it's possible. So, but the main the main, what so-and-so says, the best poa is bodhicitta. If you have a mind that thinks about the benefit of others, then automatically you get a good rebirth, So then you don't have to do this kind of poa kind of practices. So that means that if we habituate our mind to positive things, then it's easy to trigger them at the time of death. Same as you fall asleep. If you fall asleep very peaceful, right, then also the sleep is very full of rest, and you wake up and you rested. But if you fall asleep with a very agitated mind, then also when you wake up, it's same thing. I said the bardo is very similar, or the bardo in-between state, right? Bar means to be in between. So in between what? In between this life and the next life. So there's a kind of, sometimes it's a second, sometimes the bardo is 7 days, sometimes it's 49 days. It's very interesting actually, because we say maximum 49 days in our Abhidharma literature. In one of the tantras, in the Sakya tradition, mentioned in the Lamdra traditions, it says that is not 100% pervasive quote of the Abhidharma. Very interesting, actually, to be 49 days. If you study Stevenson's research, children remembering previous lifetimes, you have evidence, right? So you have evidence between the time of death and the time the person comes out of the womb, right? So then we have to calculate the period from the person coming out of the womb and entering the womb, right? So that's not clear in the research, but then if you have the period between dying and birth, we can calculate bardo period as well the time in the womb, right? So it's very similar. It's very interesting that in Stevenson's research of children remembering previous lifetimes, in these kind of 2,000 cases, that the moment in between the two lives is very similar as we explained in Abhidharma literature, how long the person is in that bardo state. So that's why it's very interesting to see that, already 2,500 years ago, without, any scientific research, they came to similar conclusions. So that's why at the time of death, it's very important to have a positive state of mind and try to enhance a positive state of mind and mind of others. When my father was dying, also my mother called me, what do I do? Luckily, I left some very precious pills behind, so my father were taking them for, I think, a few weeks, So it was very good. And then I told my mother what to do, put His Holiness, because my father met His Holiness Dalai Lama, so he felt, he's not a Buddhist, was not a Buddhist, but, he felt kind of positive, so put like that, a few photographs, and then make sure he's calm, and then he passed away very peacefully, So that means that if people pass away, that moment is very crucial, because at that time, also for us when we die, it activates karma, right? So it's very important to have a positive thought at that time. Even if you have done things wrong in this life, you regret, you purify, and try to generate, generate positive states of mind, and then rebirth will be okay. So that is very crucial time. So then also in the bardo, there's different quotations of possibility of reversing the process. If a person is in the bardo already and maybe takes a lower rebirth and you can reverse it or not, there's a lot of debate possible, but in general speaking, bardo beings, they're very sensitive. So they have clairvoyance and they can travel according to their thought. So that means if we do prayers for people who in the bardo, it has incredible effect because they're so subtle and they know we're doing prayers for them and it gives them positive ideas. So that can help. That's why it's always advisable to do a lot of prayers for people, especially the people you have a common connection with, not only before dying and during dying, but also in this bardo period. So that's why in Tibetan tradition, we do every 7 days, or every day, of course, but otherwise every 7 days until 49 days are covered. So also in Israel, I heard they did something very similar. I forgot the name of it. I cannot ask now because everybody is muted. But there's also very similar, 7 days. Very interesting. So that's how we have to act at the time of that. So come back to the meditation. So the analytical meditation, I was thinking to try to see how if we think in a positive way, it activates very, day-to-day kind of practice positive aspects of our mind, right? Yeah. So that's in relation to how we activate positive karma. Same with negative thoughts. If people are down and they think about negative things, it just brings the person in the same circle, right? You don't get out of it. So that's why how actually different ways of thinking change our mind, right? So we can maybe try to think about that, yeah? And then later on, maybe tomorrow, we can do an extra meditation on how those links come into being, because it's a very short period of time we have, so at least you get a little bit of an overview, and then slowly when you have more time, you read more about it, and then per verse or per link, you take one session and you analyze, in analytical meditation. That's traditional how we actually meditate on the 12 links. Yeah? What we do here now is kind of little bits, because there's people quite new, also a few, so it becomes a kind of quite a universal presentation as meditation as well, right? So now you have got a little bit of presentation, so then if you read them in the lamrims, then you can do, per verse you can do a meditation, or per link you can do meditation. And then combine the links together, then you get an overview, right? Each individual. Then the collections, what we just talked about, okay, what are the 3 afflictions? And why are they 3 afflictions? Right? Contemplate. What do they do? Then we have talked about 2 types of karma. How do they be established? What do they do? And then also we talked about the remaining 7 being suffering. Why are they suffering? What does it mean, contaminated aggregates, by the power of karma and afflictions? What are the sufferings of samsara, right? Birth, sickness, aging, death, mental sufferings. So that also you can contemplate later on, yeah? Yeah. So then also I promised to do the 9-round breathing, yeah? So to quiet down the mind, so to say. So the mind uses subtle energies, right? It's not only a Buddhist view in the Vajrayana practice, but also in the Hindu philosophy and in the Hindu practice we have similar ideas, right? Because the body of a Buddhist and the body of a Hindu is the same, right? The body, the nature of the mind and the energies is the same. Right? It's only the philosophy that is slightly different. Yeah? So that means that the mind uses subtle energies. So if the subtle energies are in balance, then also the mind is in balance. If the mind is in balance, then also the subtle energies are in balance, right? So that's why it means that if you're optimistic in life, in Tibetan saying Nang Kipo means being kind of easygoing and happy human being. Then also physical, that's generally speaking a better health. So that's also been proven, right? This research I just mentioned, people with a lot of, self-concern, there's anxiety, fear, and depression, afflictions. It's true. People, even doctors, they say a person who is very nervous before an operation, they decide not to operate at that time because there might be a lot of blood loss. So there's a relationship between mind and body, right? So for that purpose we do the breathing exercise, because most of the time, if you check, the movement between the nostrils is not exactly the same. So then to make it balanced, then we do this 9-round breathing. It comes from a very secret instruction, but most lamas, they do it as an introduction because they don't explain too much. But it helps to settle down the mind. So how we do it, there's many ways of first left or right, I don't have to explain. But so if you have your index finger of your right, and you block first your left nostril, and then you inhale to your right. And this breathing you can do a little bit forceful, not too forcefully, but when we do the calculation of the breath, it's natural, right? But here you can put a little bit of force, right? So you breathe in to your right, block your left. Then you put your index finger on your right nostril and you breathe out to your left. So that you repeat 2 times. Then the next, put your left index finger and close your right nostril and then breathing to your left. Then close your left and breathe out to your right. can do 2 more times. So if you've done that, 2 cycles of 3, then the next one is just sitting as we normally sit in meditation, then both nostrils, so in and out, so also 3 times. So then when the mind is settled down a bit, then we do concentration meditation, or to generate concentration. And the object of concentration is the breath. And then we breathe in and out, and in a natural way, now you don't force. Because the object here should be focused on the breath and counting it. You shouldn't get distracted by the movement of either more force or less force. So that's why we keep it natural. So keep it natural and then count from 1 to 10 and then start over counting. And then, what I just explained, have those 2 mental factors, alertness and mindfulness. If you count from 1 to 10, start over counting. As soon as a thought comes up of the past or the future, you recognize it with alertness, and with mindfulness you remember, I shouldn't follow this, I should be only counting the breath. And you take your mind back to the counting of the breath. So let's try to do that for about a minute or 2. Okay, then when your mind is having some concentration, then try to do the analytical meditation and try to see how previous habituations carry on. For example, if you fall asleep with a very irritated mind, though there's dream consciousness in between, but when you wake up, still there's kind of disturbance. Or you go to bed with a more peaceful mind, right? And then you wake up completely rested. See how those imprints carry on. Or you saw something on TV, or some scary images, something like that. It comes up in the dream, or you do something extremely positive throughout the day, and you dream about this holiness, or something like that. You see that things carry on. Those imprints, they come to ripening. So try to analyze a few of these examples, or one example you feel comfortable with, how the mind activates in particular previous habituation or inclination, and how that in the future actually produces a state of mind, either positive or negative, right? So try to analyze it for yourself for about 2-3 minutes. and then try to come to a conclusion, try to see that previous habituation patterns or, ways of thinking, leaves some kind of potential in the mind that ripens later on, either in the dream state or at the time of waking up. So in a similar way, it can happen when we die and get reborn. So try to come to that kind of analytical relationship. That dying is very similar to falling asleep. So I try to analyze that also for about a minute or two. At the time of death, whatever we think can activate either positive or negative aspects and propels us in a future state of existence, right? Because it's very similar to falling asleep. So try to build that bridge with reasoning. So try to analyze that also for about 2 minutes. And then try to think that it's very essential to produce more positive states of mind in order to be able to activate positive aspects. So that's why I have to train, try to come to a conclusion like that. That's why I have to train my mind in more positive thinking and generate more constructive emotions like love and kindness, compassion, in order to produce, good possibilities at the time of death. So try to think in that way, and then come to that conclusion, and then focus on that conclusion for about a minute. All right, then we can stop. Questions?
First of all, thank you so much, Geshe Namdak, for the clarity of your explanation. And I'm just wondering if that Jewish 7-day period of mourning was called Shiva.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the questions, we have quite a few. The first one, in chapter 26 of Nagarjuna's text, do verses 2 to 7 describe what typically happens in the bardo state?
Yeah, that's the easy answer. So describe what typically happens. The answer, where's one? Sorry, 2 to 7. The answer is no. Actually, because what we talk about here is 2 and 7, right? So 2 talks about consciousness, right? So that is in one lifetime, we have 3 links, right? Ignorance, action, and consciousness, right? So then, at the time of death, that action that leaves an imprint in consciousness gets activated, right? So these links actually don't describe the bardo as such. They only describe existence, of birth. So that means that in this life we have 3 links: ignorance, ignorance, action, and then the action leaves imprint in consciousness, verse number 2. And that name and form is actually the future lifetime, right? So the next rebirth. So it actually, verse 2 doesn't really talk about the bardo. The bardo is in between, the consciousness at the time of the cause, and the rebirth, right? So the bardo is in between. The bardo is not as such described within the 12 links, but it's in between, 3, because consciousness being link number 3, And name and form refers, being number 4 in the sequence, name and form actually refers to that the consciousness dives into the womb of the future mother, right? While link number 11 is actually the actual birth, coming out of the womb, So that also should be known. There's a slight difference there, in those two links, 4 and 11. So that means the 12 links don't really describe the bardo as such. The bardo happens after number 9, right? So 7, 8, 9, meaning the links, right? I make a mistake. 8, 9, and 10. Craving, grasping, and existence. Existence is the last moment in one particular birth before you die. That activates, this karma, which is called establishing karma. Then you go into the bardo, right? Which is not described in the 12 links. Then, after that, you come into name and form, number 4, the next birth, when the consciousness dives in the future mother. So the bardo is not really described within the 12 links as such. It's on the side being described. Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe. There's just a practical question from Dion, just to say that her neighbour's cat died yesterday and she'd like to help with the rebirth. They're not Buddhists, so she'd like to recite a mantra out loud, but she doesn't want to appear, a bit silly. So she just wonders if you have any advice on what mantra, any advice on what to do for this cat that's just died.
Ali, for animals doesn't matter. Cat, right? You said
yes.
Animal cat, right? Like Dorje and Jamyan kind of. so if animals die, then it doesn't matter. It's just if people not Buddhists but they have faith, it's also fine. Like my father, for example, right? Yeah. So with animals, same thing. You can, recite mantras, Mani or Medicine Buddha, whatever you feel a lot of faith in is also very important for yourself. And then it leaves imprints as long as they still can hear. It leaves imprints in the mind, right? Same with reading the Tibetan text. It leaves kind of imprint in the mind. So Vasubandhu, when he was reciting a text in his room, there was a bird sitting in the tree outside the room, could hear Vasubandhu reciting every day. Then this bird died. Then Vasubandhu thought, where is the bird? Where did it take rebirth? And there was a little village. There was a boy being born, and it was a reincarnation of this birth. Were listening to Vasubandhu's text. So this bird died, no motivation, right? And then became an incredible scholar in the Abhidhamma. But he didn't really become that a scholar in Madhyamika philosophy, for example. So that means the imprints, this animal basically got, from just reciting a text again and again and again, produces kind of activation of imprints of previous lifetimes, probably, as well as imprints to understand the text. That's why there's a lot of emphasis in our tradition on oral transmissions, Every teaching His Holiness normally gives with oral transmissions, because it puts imprints, Even lamas who so well educated, receive so many teachings, still again, they receive teachings, right? Just put imprints. Yeah. So it can be done. The cats used, and make prayers strong with good intention. Yeah.
Thank you. Specifically, she was asking if it's done silently, if the cat, that is still powerful.
It's best if the cat can hear it.
Okay.
Yeah, because then it goes in the ear consciousness and it leaves imprint. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Have we time? Are you okay for maybe more questions?
Yeah, it's fine. No. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you can see on the screen when.
I can see. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. When contact takes place, the 6th link, we talk about perceiving the object.
Yeah.
What is the object?
So the object we just discussed, right? So it can be a pizza or lasagna or an object of desire, right? Or it can be a person you dislike, right? And aversion arises. That's the object, right? So the object of the eye consciousness is shape and form. So if we see a person we dislike, we see the shape and form, the shape and color of the person, and that generates a kind of aversion, right? Yeah. So that's how an object meets consciousness. Or we look at the news and then we get depressed by seeing all the negativities, So that means, by seeing something, we start to think, right? Mental consciousness comes and then, So object can be object of the ear, right? Person was in the news, people was just talking too loud, somebody's apartment, and he shot them. So that means that the person hears the sound, cannot, has aversion to that, and doesn't like suffering, just want to be separated from the sound. So he decided to kill those persons who made the sound. So yeah, that's the contact with the object and how we react. Yeah.
Thank you. In the Wheel of Life, what do the 5 skulls crowning Yama's head symbolize?
5 skulls, Yama. Yeah, I know. I mean, it probably comes from the Vajrayana practice, where this refers to aspects of the 5 aggregates, transforming into the 5 Buddha families or something like that. Probably, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, it's probably referring to that aspect. Yeah, I'm not sure.
And there's just a query on your previous advice about the cat. Lara's just asking, isn't the consciousness in the womb of the future mum? So what would be the connection with reciting the mantra?
Because you put imprints in the continuity of the cat's mind, right? So that by itself can activate positive karma before this cat was maybe a human being somewhere, right? And by the activation of that, or maybe another animal and going around a holy object. There's many things like that, So that means, or have a connection with a teacher, in one of the previous lifetimes, and this can activate that. Same as when we do something virtuous throughout the day, it can happen. We think about this holiness in the dream or something like that, right? So that means it can activate. That's why if the cat can hear it, it's better. Yeah.
And tied in with that, the next question. When we die, when one dies, how do we actually know we're in the bardo?
Yeah, it just happens. Unless you kind of accomplished practitioner, then you're in full control. Yeah, if you're in full control of your dream, like some practitioners, they recognize the clear light of sleep. Yeah, so they meditate on emptiness at that time. Then instead of a dream body, they generate themselves into deities or whatsoever. So they know if you're capable of doing that, then you can completely transform the bardo as well. Yeah? For us ordinary beings, just see how you act when you fall asleep. It's just like, if it's like me, it's like unconsciousness. No? Then you dream, whatever comes up, whatever is karmically present, and then you wake up. Right? So that's for us ordinary beings. So similar in the bardo will happen. No?
Thank you. 2 more questions. How do you decide who has mind and who does not have mind?
Yeah.
So microbes, bacteria, coronaviruses.
Yeah. Corona. Our brother Corona. Yeah. So I mean, it's very difficult to the edge, right? So when His Holiness had the same question, he says if we can prove to a certain extent that, like a single cell amoeba, for example, right? They had a discussion about that. If it strives for happiness and likes to avoid suffering, then there's a possibility of having consciousness, right? But actually, where it actually exists and where not is for us ordinary beings very difficult. Yeah, if you have certain types of clairvoyance, probably right? But for ordinary beings, so I said a few days before, karma also has 3 levels. Manifest, not really I should say reality. Yeah? Reality has 3 levels. Manifest, like colors and shapes, we can see. We don't have to discuss or examine, it just appears to our mind, right? Yeah? Or our eye consciousness, color and shape, right? So there's a manifest aspect of reality. Then there's 2 aspects of hidden realities, right? So one is slightly hidden, and one is very hidden. So a slightly hidden aspect, for example, this cup, the manifest aspects of this cup is the color and the shape, right? I can see directly. I don't have to reason, I can just see. Yeah? But this cup is also, you can hear? This cup, not this thing is only 1 second, but every split second, this cup is also changing, right? The moment it comes into being until the present, it's changing every split second because it disintegrates. One day the paint is totally gone, but that going away of the paint doesn't happen overnight, right? It happens as soon as the pain comes up, it starts to disintegrate, right? So that momentary changing nature of the cup, we cannot see, we cannot hear, we cannot feel, we can only reason. Okay, if it comes into being after 10 years, it looks like this, so that means it has to momentarily disintegrate. There's a reason, right? So that's a slightly hidden phenomena, right? There's also very hidden phenomena, like we being here on Zoom, how many of us, I don't know, but we all together on Zoom. So when in the past, because nothing is random, when in the past did we create a cause for being all together connected over Zoom today during this pandemic? So that's very difficult to know, but it's a cause and effect relationship, right? So in a similar way, those subtle aspects of reality, like having consciousness or not, on these kind of, border areas, you have to have some kind of clairvoyance to know that. Yeah. Otherwise, we can reason. Okay, if it follows striving for happiness and eliminating suffering, then we can think that it might have consciousness. Yeah. It's a bit okay or not? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And the final question that we have today, Geshe, you can see it there. Just this question about the karma. I think maybe you actually covered that.
Oh, that's right. No,
yeah.
I'm going to stop doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think you covered that actually.
Yeah, teachings of the Buddha, right, is not easy. Yeah, and put it into practice is even more difficult. But why is it not easy? Because we talk about the mind, and the mind is very complex. Yeah, there's very simple aspects of the Buddhist teachings. Yeah, where we just talk about destructive emotions and constructive emotions, how to transform anger into a mind of calmness or patience, right? So that are also aspects of Buddhism. It is easy to be understood. Yeah? But the subject of this retreat is also the 12 links of independence, right? Which is a little bit more complex than just the mind from one day to the other, right? So we're talking about many lifetimes. Yeah? So that means that causes our mind a little bit to need more time to understand it. That's why I said at the monastery we studied this for 2-3 months, right? So don't expect that you can understand this within 2 or 3 days or 4 days whatsoever. But at least we have a little bit idea, and then you read again. You get in the second reading, you get a little bit more. In the third reading, you get a little bit more. You discuss with others a little bit more, and slowly it starts to come, right? Yeah. But every time you read, it leaves a kind of, it's not lost. The knowledge is not lost, right? Because the next time we read it, we get a bit more. That means the previous little understandings, whatever is there, is getting enhanced in more deeper understandings, right? Yeah?
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Time, and be patient with these things. Don't stress out. Some people say, oh, I want to learn it now, but that is not possible, So it takes time, right? Yeah. And enjoy the kind of things. Okay, I don't understand now, but next time, So that's, in the monastery, same thing. We receive so many complicated teachings, But then the teacher just said, okay, read, study, debate, and come back. And then slowly it starts to make sense, Yeah? Because we're talking about, for example, if you want to become a doctor, right? You want to become a good doctor to eliminate sickness. Yeah, you have to study quite a bit. Some studies are quite complex, medicine. Yeah? So here we're talking about not only getting rid of just an ordinary sickness, we're thinking about getting rid of all sicknesses, right? So the meaning, it needs a little bit more investment of understanding the mind and samsara in order to be able to do that. Yeah? So that's why it takes a little bit more investment. Yeah, that's why our education in the monastery and the nunneries is like 20 years, not like 4 years university, 20 years, right? So then you see that, it's not just kind of, secondary school or something. Yeah.
Geshe, thank you so very much. And those are all of the questions
all right.
asked, I think. And just an announcement to everyone, and a thank you to you, Geshe, that on Thursday you've kindly agreed to do teachings in the morning from 10 until 12, and then again in the afternoon on Thursday from 3 until 5. So thank you for that, Geshe, and for those who can join for both sessions, wonderful. If not, the recordings hopefully will be available straight away.
Yeah, because we missed one day,
yes, we
right?
missed a day,
yeah.
so
yeah.
this is to replace them. So thank you for that, Geshe.
No problem. I'm just looking for the prayer. I think I got lost. So yeah, then we do dedications, right?
Yes, yeah.
So the Lamrim dedication prayer. Where it is. Praise and conclusion. Can you help me with the page number or not?
Yes, if you could help me with
Yeah,
that.
oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Sorry
35,
about that.
yeah. Sorry for that. Page 35.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you very much.
First, it's my first time I use all this kind of high-tech with a laptop and iPad, and it's for me also first time. So yeah, try to dedicate. Yeah, so try to dedicate that. According to the lines of the prayer, but the main thing is the mental, dedication. Right, the words are the words, but try to think about the meaning when you recite the prayers. Yeah, very important. So Lamrim prayer. For my two types of merits, vast space that I've amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become a chief living Buddha for all those whose wisdom mind is blind by ignorance. Even I do not reach the states, may I be held in your loving compassion for all my lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of great teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means, drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings. With the points of the paths that I discern them, may I behold Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread or once have declined, I will reveal this treasury of happiness and aid. Those who run liberation be granted boundless peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time. By even this graduate path to enlightenment completed, due to the victorious conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all humans and non-human beings who eliminate diversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest paths praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone made effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may the notion of prosperity spread everywhere. Then the other ones we just, I recite and we just think in the lines, right? That's the main thing, right? When His Holiness once in Dharamsala gave the Bodhisattva vow, generating mind of enlightenment, then there was a few verses also from Nagarjuna's Ratnavali, very moving verses, and everybody got a copy. And then someone said, you can recite, but the main thing is think in that direction to generate the vow, So the same thing. Dedication is not only reading, it's thinking. Yeah? So try to dedicate for the three purposes, of spreading the Dharma, long and healthy life of the Gurus, and enlightenment for all beings. Yeah? So try to dedicate that these teachings may come available for all those who, be able to progress on these stages of path to enlightenment as quick as possible, without any decline. Yeah? Dagi dine sawe gewa di tendan dowa kindangam geba jasan dozan rabai tembe nimbo rindo selje. And also may the teachers who teach these teachings, like His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and all the teachers teaching the true path to enlightenment, may they long and healthy life, and may all the holy wishes be spontaneous fulfilled. Kare rawe korwe zinganso pendan dewa malu jongwe. And then, of course, may oneself and all sentient beings quickly generate the three principles aspects of the path in their mind stream, renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. First, renunciation, ngejong samba rinpoche magye pana ngegyochik gyaba nyamba meba yangone gonde bewa sho. Then bodhicitta. Janjo semjo rinpoche magye pana kegyoche gyeba nyamba meba yangone gonde bewa. Then emptiness. Toni tawa rinpoche magye pana kegyoche gyeba nyamba meba yangone gonde bewa. And then oneself and all sentient beings who are empty of inherent existence and in the nature of dependent origination, may they quickly progress on the stage of path to enlightenment for the benefit of all modern sentient beings. Gewa kunde yanda lama dan damatu lunges in sanda lamgi yunda rabzo ne doje changi goba nyoto. Okay, thank you very much. And see you tomorrow. And pray that Zoom also is the same as today. Yeah. Okay, thank you.